morning, you wonderful YouTubers. Welcome to my channel. You find me on the familiar route today. I'm just going past what used to be the Royal Haslar Hospital. Excuse me. I've got 1,000 frogs in my throat at the moment. And I'm on my way to Stokes Bay. I need to get some more photographs, or a couple of photographs, to complete the bank of photographs I need for today's history. It's going to be a local history on Gosport's part in the preparations and the run-up to D-Day. This week is just the end of last week, was the anniversary, the 81st anniversary of D-Day. So I thought it'd be a bit poignant to commemorate Gosport's part in that. Ooh. Roadworks all over the place. So yeah, that's been quite an educational thing to do. I've done most of the narrative already. Hopefully I'll finish the rest this afternoon, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. What have I been up to all week? Saturday I was looking after my 2 grandchildren, and as I was going to Aldi with them, walking to Aldi, the smallest one, bless him, 5 years old, not his fault, inadvertently stepped in front of me, caught my left leg. I went down like a sack of muck and hurt my right knee and right wrist. The right knee is fine now, but the wrist still a little bit achy. Let's see how it is after today's ride. Come on, lights. There we go. And so yeah, been in a bit of pain all week. And never mind, big boy. Okay, I'll get over it. What else have I been up to all week? I've not been able to get out this last week. God, excuse me, I really have got 1,000 frogs. Let me compose myself with this, and I'll get back to you in a sec. Right, so I'm back. Yes, so as I say, I've not been out much. The weather has been appalling. Several days of rain, and it's just not been conducive to a good ride out. That's the way it is when you own a motorbike, so never mind. Yeah, other than that, it's been a half decent week, I suppose. Been busy, keeping myself busy. I suppose in retirement you have to. I am getting the Indimate Series 2 indicator warning. So what I'll do with that one, I didn't do it on the first one because I really didn't know what I was doing. But now I'm that much the wiser. What I will do is a complete unpacking and review, or installation and review. And I'll make that a completely separate, whenever it's finished, kind of video. Hopefully some of you will be a bit tempted, because trust me, it's worth its weight in gold. So I'm not going to turn this left, which would take me to the Gaffer's lifeboat station, but I will be going left on the next one. These fields here, I'm going to mention them later, to my left. I don't know if you can see them or not. I'll point them out in a bit. Are where the Canadians camped out when they were preparing for D-Day, where they were based basically. But more on that later on. So we'll take this next left into the car park. I think part of the reason it reminds you that your indicators are on is just such an annoying sound when it's right in your ear. So it definitely works. So here we are at Stokes Bay. And as I say, more of the history of the D-Day preps and everything later on. But for now, I just want to get some footage. So I'm going to leave you here for now. That's it. And go and do my thing. And I'll be back soon. As most of you will know, this last week saw the 81st anniversary of the D-Day landings, otherwise known as Operation Overlord. A tactical move that saw the loss of 4,414 Allied troops, 1,449 of which were British. This is going to be quite a long history, and I really make no apologies for that. All along the Solent coastline, inhabitants of the towns and cities of from Portsmouth to Southampton saw their lives change dramatically. 2 years before the actual invasion of D-Day, preparations were either practiced, planned or supplied for on just about every town that had a beach and the areas surrounding them. There would have been seen many troops, military transport, tanks, amphibious craft, landing craft and troop-carrying ships in their harbours and on their beaches and camped out in their fields. For this history, I'd like to concentrate on the beaches and areas of Gosport. They would have been Lyon-Solent, Stokes Bay, the Hardway, and Pretty's Hard, not forgetting of course the involvement of the areas of Elson and Brockhurst. Train lines would have been utilised such as Brockhurst Station, where troops were disembarked to be accommodated at Fort Brockhurst. The line extended to Lyon-le-Solent and Stokes Bay, where the practiced disembarkation of landing craft, troop ships and destroyers would have taken place. Next to what then was the train station, but now is the Olympia Arcade, was the tower and ballrooms, which is now a car park. During the war, and strategically on the run-up to D-Day, the tower was painted in camouflage colours of black and olive drab in random blobs. Because of its commanding view of the Solent, Isle of Wight and surrounding areas inland, the tower became one of the main headquarters of the Solent area of operations, with the Fleet Air Arm HQ in Daedalus. The recently commissioned Fleet Air Arm Airfield, HMS Daedalus, was the base for various squadrons of aircraft, such as fighter escorts, gliders, tow aircraft and bombers of the British and Canadian Air Forces, with the 778 Naval Air Squadron, formed on the 28th of September 1939 at Royal Navy Air Service at Lyon-Solent, was tasked with testing aircraft and armaments and assessing tactics. Massive anti-aircraft balloons and gun emplacements were dotted around the airfield and on the coastline, but at all times an air of secrecy was maintained. Day and night, the area of Lee was subjected to the noises and activities that are associated with soldiers, sailors and airmen training, right up to D-Day itself on the 6th of June 1944, when the many soldiers, airmen and sailors set off from Lee for Sword Beach in Normandy. Lee's involvement and assistance and his contribution leading up to the D-Day helped to turn the tide of the war, which can never be understated. The local people can be proud of their ancestors for their contributions and the sacrifices they made to help the war effort. Before I move on to Stokes Bay, I'd like to mention Browndown. During the preparations for D-Day, the ranges at Browndown were used extensively. When you consider the thousands of soldiers along the south coast in the Solent area that departed for Normandy, you can appreciate the need for them to practice their shooting, especially as many of them would have been new recruits whose experience of battle and weaponry would have been slim to say the least. So the importance of this area cannot be understated and should be remembered with the same reverence as the rest of the preparations. So on to Stokes Bay, which played a very major role in the lead up to D-Day. Stokes Bay was one of the principal sites for the development, testing and building of the component parts of the Mulberry Harbours, in part because the beach drop was very similar to that of the beaches at Normandy. All along the Stokes Bay beaches, which stretch a good 3 kilometres long, stretching from Gilkicker Fort in the east to the Browndown in the west. At the west end of Stokes Bay, Bay House and Alverbank Hotel were requisitioned by the 79th Armoured Division for the training of the crews who would operate the duplex drive or amphibious tanks on D-Day. The duplex drive, or DD tanks as they were known, were conventionally Valentine and Sherman tanks that were fitted with canvas screens and propellers. The screen was supported by air-filled pillars and struts, as well as a series of tubular frames, which when inflated allowed the tank and the equipment to displace more than its own weight in water, thus making the tank buoyant. When at sea, only the top 3 feet of the screen could be seen, effectively concealing the tank beneath the waves. The DDs were part of the funnies, which were developed to combat the various German defences and obstacles. The site at Stokes Bay was used between September 1943 and May 1944 as the saltwater training school. DD tanks were parked in the vicinity of what is now the Kingfisher Mobile Home Park, and here they were waterproofed and maintained. The tanks would be driven down to the hards, so named because they were hard standings on an otherwise shingled beach, where they loaded landing craft in the area which is now the present-day car park. Each landing craft, which an original is now part of the D-Day exhibition at Southsea in Portsmouth, and it sits next to the Southsea Castle, would hold 9 Valentine DDs, and once loaded they would motor out towards the Isle of Wight 1,200 yards off the coast. The DDs would inflate their screens and return to Stokes Bay under their own steam. Today there are monuments at the bay seafront to commemorate D-Day and the Canadian and British sacrifices made on Normandy beaches. The first one is to mainly commemorate the Canadians' contribution, who set off from Stokes Bay, and during the run-up they were accommodated in tented accommodation on Stokes Bay Common. Some permanent brick buildings were erected at the time which are now gone, but their footprint can still be seen. The other monument is a recent addition, but is a wonderful commemoration to all the forces who left for the bay. A closer look at the benches even, shows a different scene and commemoration. Also, if you look hard enough, evidence of the occupation of the fields inland from the beach is still visible, as well as that evidence, remnants of the beachside slipways that were put in place to allow access to the Mulberry Harbours can still be seen at low tide. I would say hats off to the residents of Alverstoke, who would have been heavily involved with keeping the troops fed and watered. Places such as the Royal Navy Armament Depot at Priddy's Hard also had a huge role to play. Specifically, they worked a full stretch for over 2 years to build up stocks of ammunition, rockets, shells and mines to supply the many soldiers, tanks, aircraft and ships, and more for the actual operation. Also, the Royal Clarence Victualling Yard supplied enormous daily supplies of food for the D-Day fleet whilst the fleet was assembling prior to D-Day. In Hasler Creek, HMS Hornet was the headquarters for the motor torpedo boat flotillas, and all the civilian staff would have put in a great deal of effort and time to ensure that everything was 100% ready for the push. Lastly, the Hardway, now home to the Gosport ferry, but if we go back to those days, it was made into a concrete slipway next to the chain ferry where troop and vehicle front-loading ships could be moored to allow the loading of tanks, jeeps, lorries and other supporting equipment that would have been too much for the landing craft, as you can see in this photo. So overall, Gosport's contribution to the war effort, their sacrifices, all helped to change the course of the war and ultimately helped to end it. It now just remains to remember those soldiers, sailors and airmen that gave the ultimate sacrifice to ensure our freedoms today. We salute you, gentlemen. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you got something from that little history. I certainly did when I was writing it. So until next week, take care, ride safe, and I'll see you then. As most of you will know, this last week saw the 81st anniversary of the D-Day landings, otherwise known as Operation Overlord, a tactical move that saw the losses of 4,414 Allied troops, 1,449 of those lives lost being British. This is going to be a quite long history, and I make no apologies for that.